Good morning. This is Elisabetta Jezek. Together with Costanza Marini and Emma Romani, we are presenting our work at eLex 2021. The title of our presentation is Encoding Semantic Phenomena in Verb-argument Combinations. Our talk is structured as follows. First, we will have an introduction and theoretical background. Second, we will present our two resources, TPAS and CroatiPAS. Third, we will discuss three distinct semantic phenomena. In particular, the three phenomena we will focus on in this presentation, which are semantic type alternation, semantic type shift, and complex type exploitation. We will end the presentation with some concluding observations. We will take 2 points for our introduction and theoretical background. The first point regards word senses. In corpus-based lexicographic practice, word senses have long been shown to be slippery entities and to be better conceived as abstractions from clusters of corpus citations. And we reference here the work of Adam Kilgariff and Patrick Hanks. From the point of view of theoretical lexical semantics, it is nowadays assumed that particular word meanings, are semantically flexible. And word meaning is built compositionally as a function of the interaction of the co-occurring words and the context of utterance. And we refer here to the work of James Pustojovsky, and François Recanati. So against this background, according to which word senses are difficult entities to capture and define, and on the other side, they are difficult exactly because they vary depending on the context. So against this background, we created two novel lexical resources that, among other things, encode the sense variation of nouns and verbs in valency structures. In this talk, in particular, we will focus on sense variation of nouns in argument positions that we assume are triggered by the verb they combine with. And the aim of our talk is to show how we encoded this variation in the schema editor that we developed for annotators. So in order to show you the encoding of this phenomena, we should recall that we used different components. First, the methodological component, corpus pattern analysis, adopted from Hanks. Second, the system of semantic types that we use to classify the semantic of arguments. Third, compositional principles that account for how word meaning is generated in the context of use. And in particular, we will adopt semantic type coercion and exploitation inspired by generative lexicon theory. I now give the floor to Emma and Costanza for presenting the two resources and the first two phenomena at play in verb-argument combination.
In this part of the video, we are going to introduce our resources. I'm going to talk about TPAS for Italian language, and my colleague Costanza will talk about CroatiPAS for Croatian language. Both resources are repositories of type predicate argument structures, which are patterns that display the semantic and syntactic properties of verbs. The two sister projects are developed at the University of Pavia with the technical support of lexical computing, and they are intended for linguistic analysis, language teaching, and computational applications. The two resources share 4 fundamental components, but also have some differences due to the typology of the languages, which will be highlighted soon. First of all, both resources have this repository of corpus-derived predicate argument structures, also called patterns, with semantic specification of their argument slots through semantic types. Second, they contain an inventory of around 200 corpus-derived semantic classes called semantic types, and they are organized in a hierarchy based on the ISA relation. Third, the patterns are linked to a corpus of annotated sentences that instantiate the different patterns of the verbs in the inventory. And finally, all the resources are based on an editor system called Schema that allows to register patterns and their syntactic and semantic information and the manual annotation of corpus instances. Next, we have a screenshot from the Italian version of the resource, and it consists of 1,160 implemented verbs with 5,529 patterns and around 200,000 annotated corpus instances. And now we are going to see in more detail how the two resources are structured. So we present the general organization of both resources in Schema Editor, and we take as an example the Italian resource. So in the upper part of the image, we have a list of the 4 patterns for one verb, the verb bere, which means to drink. And each pattern corresponds to a meaning of the verb. And below, we have the part of Schema in which we have the argument slots that can be filled with various semantic and syntactic information. Especially, the arguments are specified by their semantic types, which are the colored words, and they are taken from the hierarchy in the image above. And finally, the corpus instances, which are the upper part of this image, are linked to the patterns through a corresponding number. And in this case, the portion of the corpus displays instances for the pattern number 1 of the verb.
Now we will focus on Croatipas, which is the Croatian equivalent of the Italian TPAS resource. As you can see from this slide, the layout of the resource is going to be quite similar to the online beta version that we already have for TPAS. And this is a screenshot of the verb piti, which means to drink, and of the 6 senses that were recorded for this verb. The current resource size is 180 verbs, 683 patterns, and approximately 23,000 annotated corpus lines. So the resource size is way smaller than the Italian resource because the Croatipas project is younger, it started 2 years ago, and the 180 verbs that Croatipas contains are the translational equivalents of a selected sample of 100 Italian verbs already present in TPAS. This is a screenshot taken from the Croatian Skema editor, which is a customized version of Schema. And the main features that distinguish it from the Italian Schema editor are the addition of bottom right indexes to the semantic types with specification of the cases, since Croatian is a Slavic language with a 7-case case system. Moreover, as you can see from this slide, the editor also contains a specification of a grammatical aspect. In this case, we're talking about the imperfective variant. So there is a slot specifying that. And as you can see, each argumental slot has a specific text area where the case can be added. We're now going to talk about the semantic phenomena that we are encoding in our resources. And the first phenomenon that we're gonna talk about is semantic type alternation. Semantic type alternation consists in the possibility of alternating 2 different semantic types, non-related semantic types, on the same argument slot. In this case, we're seeing a pattern from the verb rimuovere, which means remove, from the TPAS resource. The semantic type human and the semantic type wind both instantiate the same meaning of the verb to remove and are therefore equally available on this argument slot. As you can see, these are some of the corpus lines that were tagged since they instantiate this sense of the verb to remove. And for instance, you can see the major of the first sentence would be translated as the major of Pieve had a big banner removed, whereas the second one, wind and water may remove uranium dust from the vehicle's surface. These are both sentences that instantiate the same meaning of remove. In the second example, we're going to concentrate on the semantic type alternation on the object slot of pattern number 3 from the verb otkriti, to reveal, taken from the Croatipas resource. The alternation at play is between part of body and body. These two semantic types are actually related meronymically, since a part of body is a part of the semantic type body. With the garment as subject, they both instantiate the same meaning of the verb otkriti, meaning to reveal, to leave naked, said part of body or body. And so we have here some examples taken from the corpus, which instantiate this sense. And for example, we have the following example. She took off the glamorous dress and changed into a yellow bikini, which revealed a truly perfect body. Same meaning we also have in a sentence, the corset revealed her bare shoulders.
So the second phenomenon we are considering in this work is semantic type shift, which is the change in meaning of an argument caused by metonymic displacements. It means that a semantic type is forced by the verb to be understood as a different one. This phenomenon is not encoded as semantic type alternation, instead as a different pattern, or better, a sub-pattern is registered directly connected to the main patterns it derives from. For Italian language, we can consider this example, in which the first sentence, I've recently read the Harry Potter book, is an instantiation of document semantic type in the object position. This case reflects the main pattern, number 2, in the figure above, and is a very regular case. Instead, the second sentence, I've read Dante, Moravia, Calvino, as Dante, Moravia, Calvino as instantiations of human writers. So the classical metonymic example offer to its work is a play. So by Dante, Moravia, Calvino, in this case, we mean the documents they have written. This case matches with subpattern 2.m, which is registered in the figure above under the main pattern.
The same can be said for another semantic type shift encoded in the Croatipas resource, namely subpattern 1.1.m of the verb studirati, which means to study. The main pattern is human studies field or an activity, while the subpattern is a human studies musical instrument. When we have examples such as the ones tagged as 1.1.m in the corpus lines below, and I'm talking about, for example, studira via violoncello. When we say he studied cello, we are not saying that he studied literally an instrument, but he studied how to play said instrument. So there is a metonymic shift between the musical instrument itself and the activity of playing it.
Let us now move on to the third phenomena under consideration, which is complex type exploitation. First off, we need to clarify that in the system of semantic types in TPAS, we acknowledge the existence of complex types. So what are complex types? Complex types are unique semantic types that are made up of 2 or more components. They are associated with nouns that are inherently polysemous. For example, we assume that institution is a complex type and that it is made up of 2 components, abstract entity and human group. In the schema editor, we currently encode complex types as simple semantic types. as in the case of institution. However, we do keep track of their internal complexity by locating them in multiple places in the system of semantic types. So, for example, we see here a portion, a section of the system of semantic type, and where one can see that the complex type institution is registered both as a type of human group and as a type of abstract entity. So let us now see examples of complex type exploitation, and we will focus on examples with the complex type institution. For instance, pattern 5 of accettare, to accept, that you see in the slide, features complex type exploitation, and in particular, it features institution in subject position, which is, in this case, exploited in its human group component. In fact, only a human or a human group can be said to accept something. An example here from the corpus is: non tutte le università accettavano le donne, l'Università di Varsavia era tra queste. Not all universities accepted women, and the University of Warsaw was one of them. So here we have institution which is exploited in its human group component. On the other hand, with pattern 7 of dissolvere, to dissolve, which appears here in its figurative meaning, so pattern 7 features institution in object position, and institution is here exploited by the co-occurring verb, by dissolvere, in its abstract entity component. So an example from the corpus is: le invasioni barbariche, which is an eventuality, dissolvono l'impero. So we see the translation here below: barbaric invasion tore apart the empire. So we have seen two examples of complex type exploitation, in particular an example where institution is exploited in its two different components. However, we do have examples where both components are exploited in the same instance, as in the case of this example in the slide that features a linguistic phenomenon called copredication. Let us read the example. L'Università di Padova fu fondata nel 1222 ed è stata la prima al mondo ad accettare studenti ebrei. The University of Padua was founded in 1222, and it was the first in the world to accept Jewish students. So we saw here that Università di Padova, which is the institution in subject position, is both exploited as abstract entity by fondare and as human group by accettare. So this is a case in which complex type, the whole complex type is, so to speak, exploited. These are, however, very infrequent cases. Concluding observations. We have shown how semantic phenomena that take place in verb-argument combinations are encoded in two electronic resources dedicated to the description of corpus-derived verb-argument structures for Italian and Croatian. In particular, we have discussed cases in which there is an alternation of semantic types on the same argument position within the same verb sense, cases where there is a semantic type shift, and finally, we just looked at cases where a single component of a complex type denoted by a noun is exploited in the composition. And we have also seen an infrequent example of copredication where both components are actually exploited. In the near future, the data of the two resources will be made public through a graphical interface. We have today presented the editor that the annotators use to build the resource and encode the phenomenon. But in the graphical interface that the user will be able to use will be available soon, and the user will be able to search for the three phenomena by browsing the patterns and the sub-pattern inventory. And pattern and subpattern will be accompanied by good dictionary examples that will be selected from the annotated corpus for each pattern. So the data in the two resources, what are they useful for? We think they can be useful for several goals. First, for linguistic research in syntax and semantics. For example, for studies aiming at classifying verbs based on the semantic selection of their arguments. The data in the two resources, we believe, can also be useful for corpus-based approaches to language teaching and as a gold standard in natural language processing tasks, such as those on metonymy and figurative language recognition, in the line of previous work, for example, Shutova et al., 2013. Thank you for listening.